Okay, everyone, I'm Brendan Zubricki. I'm the town administrator here in Essex, and welcome to the forum that we have tonight with respect to the future of the Essex Causeway and the flooding issue that is expected to become more common. I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast. Just by way of general introduction, in the town of Essex, we have a road segment of Route 133, which is a state highway downtown. A portion of this roadway is known as the Causeway. It's where the restaurants are in downtown Essex. And it floods sometimes, not only during storms and storm surges, it floods also even on days where we have a super high tide, like what we call a king high tide, even if the weather is great outside. Tonight, we have some people from the Metropolitan Planning Organization with us. But before I get to them, I'm going to introduce Maureen Elward from Town Green. Town Green is a group that's more local here on Cape Ann. And Maureen, why don't you say just a few words about it before we introduce the MPO folks?
Thank you so much, Brendan. Yeah, Town Green is a local climate-based organization. We cover all of Cape Ann. What we do is climate awareness education, and we are also a convener. So we do community engagement programs, and we're going to be forming a working group model this spring for the municipalities to come together and have conversations about climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. So we're really excited about standing up this new project. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to introduce the people from MPO. Stephen Andrews, next to Stephen is Lauren McGee, and next to Lauren is Stella Jordan. Who's going to kick it off for us? Okay, so Lauren's going to give us just a little bit about what MPO is and then begin with the presentation and what they're trying to achieve this evening. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Brendan. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren, and I'm an assistant planner with the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the organization responsible for the federally required metropolitan planning process in the Boston metropolitan area. And so over the last few months, we've been assisting the town of Essex with an analysis of the flooding issues on Route... Closer, okay. On Route 133 and Main Street, but more specifically on the Causeway. So today we'll present some background information, the purpose of our report, the literature we've reviewed, an overview of the public engagement that we've done, and the analysis from our study. As many of you are already aware, there is significant concern about flooding on the Causeway, which is represented in these two maps by the red dot on Main Street. And so the map on the left shows downtown Essex, and the map on the right shows Main Street more closely. These maps also show the Essex River, which flows under the Causeway, and the surrounding marshland, which does contribute to its vulnerability. According to recent data from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, the Causeway supports about 12,000 vehicles a day, which represents its role in regional connectivity. However, as Brendan explained, the Causeway currently floods during storm surges and high tides, which disrupts travel, contributes to economic losses, and places stress on the town's emergency response resources. These concerns prompted town officials to approach the MPO for technical assistance to study these flooding issues. And now I will briefly overview just some of the information about our report and its purposes. Our report has 5 main deliverables. The first one being to provide maps and visualizations to understand and communicate exposure of assets to past, current, and future coastal flood hazards. The second one is to provide relevant summaries from existing plans. The third is to provide data and analysis of existing travel patterns on the Causeway. to demonstrate the causeway's role in regional connectivity, and to provide information and create connections to enable Essex Town staff to move forward on resolving these flooding issues on the causeway. Ultimately, this work will support the town of Essex's efforts to pursue a solution to these flooding issues. So first, I'll briefly review our literature review, which is a summary of a collection of state, regional, and local reports that are relevant to this work. Some of the reports that we reviewed is the Town of Essex's Hazard Mitigation Plan, the Great Marsh Coastal Adaptation Plan, the Massachusetts Climate Change Assessment, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation's Resilience Improvement Plan, and the Town of Essex's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program report. And so despite the previous construction on the causeway that these plans have described to us, it's clear that they all agree that that Essex and the causeway continue to be vulnerable to these flooding issues, and it will only worsen with increases in sea level rise and storm surge severity. These sources recommend both short and long-term solutions, many of which also address the impacts to emergency services, which is one of the most pressing issues that we found through this study. These sources also agree that failure to address this issue will continue to result in economic losses, erosion of the roadway, impacts to emergency services, and stress on the current alternative route, which is Apple Street. These reports also gave us insight into some of the previous public engagement that has been done on this topic, which has informed our own public engagement strategy. And so some of these previous public engagement activities were done through the town's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program work and the formation of the most recent Hazard Mitigation Plan. And so these public engagement activities reveal to us that addressing flooding on the causeway is a key concern and priority for residents, local businesses, and those traveling through Essex on Route 133. And while our study mainly focused on technical analysis, we really wanted to understand the perspectives of the local business community due to their unique experiences with this issue. And we were able to engage with these local businesses through the Greater Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce. And we had a really insightful discussion about how local business owners have been impacted by the flooding and what the major concerns are for the future of Essex's business environment. And some of these key takeaways included that the causeway is a vital and historic asset to the town of Essex and its culture, that adaptation to the flooding is expensive and potentially unsustainable for some businesses, the impacts of flooding on the local businesses along the causeway must be considered due to their unique circumstance in the situation. It was also brought up that flood insurance is a major concern. It's unsustainable for the town's emergency services. And lastly, there is a strong desire for collaborative, action-oriented solutions, particularly with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And now I'll go over some of the results from our analysis. In this section, we'll cover sea level rise projections, coastal flood exceedance probabilities and depths, impervious surfaces on the roadway, and modeling work showing impacts to mobility. And due to the causeway's coastal geography and proximity to the Essex River, it has already begun experiencing flooding, which is expected to worsen as sea levels continue to rise. The causeway's exposure to coastal flooding can be understood by looking at sea level rise, coastal flood exceedance probabilities and depths, and the amount of impervious surface on the roadway. And so according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, the Boston area could experience up to 1.5 feet of sea level rise by 2050. This scenario is the top pink line on the graph on the slide and is the high scenario.
Recording in progress.
And so this first map. Someone's unmuted. I think, yeah, there you go. Okay, sorry about that. So this first map shows Main Street and the Causeway. The Causeway is again depicted by the red marker. And this is what high tide could look like in 2050 if 1.5 feet of sea level rise is reached. And so we depicted this by showing 1.5 feet above what's called mean higher high water, which is the average height of the highest high tides an area can experience. And so this map shows that the causeway is likely to be extremely vulnerable to flooding at high tide in 2050, which at that point could be a daily event. Next, I will speak about coastal flood exceedance probabilities and depths. And for this analysis, we utilized the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model, or MCFRM, which is a model developed by the Woods Hole Group to simulate storm surge-induced flooding along Massachusetts coast. And so these maps depict exposure to a range of storm types. The darkest purple color shows where flooding would occur with minor, more frequent storms. And the lightest color shows where flooding might occur in the most severe scenarios. So it starts in with the purple and the blue areas, with the exception of the Essex River that is depicted in that specific shade of blue. With the flooding could extend out to those areas in more severe circumstances. And so the map on the right represents present-day projections, while the map on the left shows projections in 2050. And so in 2050, there is clearly an projected increase in the flooded area, most of which seems to possibly occur in minor, more frequent storm events. In 2050, the model projects much more of Main Street becoming flooded than in present day. Although in both scenarios, the causeway is completely inundated. And these next two maps show coastal flood depths for a major storm or a nor'easter in present day and in 2050. And so on these maps, the darkest blue color represents the deepest flood areas, which exceeds 10 feet. And then the lightest blue represents flooding between 0 and 1/2 of a foot. Similarly to the previous maps, these models show that flood depths will increase significantly and cover much more land area in 2050. The causeway is also completely inundated with at least about between 5 and 10 feet of flooding in both scenarios, and much of Main Street is inundated, but seems to worsen in 2050. And this third map shows the locations of impervious surfaces in the downtown of Essex, excuse me. But generally, high amounts of impervious surfaces can exacerbate flooding because they prevent rainfall from infiltrating groundwater. And so examples would include paved roads, parking lots, buildings, and other infrastructure. And while the causeway is close to a large marsh, there is still a sizable amount of impervious surface associated with the area's commercial businesses. And these areas will likely be subject to excess runoff during rainstorms and other storm events, which can also have implications for water quality surrounding the marsh. And now I will hand it off to my colleague, Stephen Andrews, to present some of our modeling work.
So this next section relies on data from a product we use called Replica. This is a transportation data provider. They create a synthetic model of how people travel across the country. They use things like location-based services, sales transactions on your phone, land use data, census data, and they match it to ground truth data. It provides a pretty realistic view of how that people use the transportation network. We compared counts that we've done with the recent MassDOT counts to Replica's roadway volumes. We found that they were pretty similar in the grand scheme of how good models are and how good traffic counts are. So they kind of tell the same story. So what we could do is we could look at what does this product say, how does this product say people use travel in the region. And this says that about 20,000 trips a day start or end in Essex County or travel within Essex County, and about 8,000 trips pass through without actually stopping here, where this is not the destination, it's the means to get to where someone is going. And I'll just note that excludes the little corner of Route 128 that it's the corner in the southeast there. So when the causeway becomes inundated, those 8,000 plus some portion of the 20,000 that want to go from one side of the town to the other have to go somewhere. So Replica, they also provide a tool that says their normal model, they run their model, they put people on roads and the people go places to buy things and visit their friends and family. And they give you the chance to say, okay, well, what if a road was not available? What would they do instead? Where would they go? So now you take out roads as you please, and the model reruns where people are going to go. It forces people to new choices. It knows where they're going, when they're going. It loads the network. So in this case, if we just close, disable not Apple Street, I'm sorry, the causeway, Replica kind of pushes people to the next logical path, which I think makes sense. It tries to push people onto Apple Street, which I think if you look at a map, that would probably be where that's probably where Google would route you to. So it's suggesting that there's an extra upwards of 5,000 trips a day that would be trying to do that. I'd be interested to hear what your experience is during a king tide where you're actually seeing that many people, and we'll talk later, I'm sure. It also pushes people onto Route 1A up in Hamilton. It pushes people down through Route 22, Grapevine Road, over by Gordon College. And then, of course, people use Route 128. So now the other part of that is, if we look at those flood maps, there's also the situation where Apple Street could become inundated eventually. There's a small part, but it means you couldn't even use it if you wanted to, really. So that kind of puts it into, I think the way that I describe it when I write it is like more and more. It's more severe and it's more far-reaching. So it turns, if Apple Street goes, it turns it from an Essex problem into more of a regional problem, where you're starting to get, your Western Ave is starting to get a few thousand extra vehicles. Chubacco Road is getting an extra 1,000 vehicles on it, which is, I see some faces. Yes, I'm aware of that. And then down through Gordon College, you're getting an even worse effect. I will point out that there's a few of these roads on here where at Apple Street or Chubacco Road that the tools themselves may try to put the vehicles on them, and the roads themselves may not actually be able to handle all of those vehicles. So some of these things that when you get into modeling, the model will say something, and sometimes you need to interpret it again for yourself and say, yeah, I don't actually think that this road could hold this many people. So in the case of Apple Street, it's suggesting that there's 5,000 people a day, 500 some odd in the peak hour. It's both directions, so 250. And there's some pretty tight turns on Apple Street that might be challenging to serve that many cars, especially when you factor in commercial vehicles, which are larger and cannot necessarily do those tight turns with cars everywhere. So this is all to say, those 11,000 people that are going on over the causeway get pushed out onto the next roads. When you close off the next path, they get pushed out onto the region. I will add that Replica does not suggest that it does provide a volume to capacity ratio, which is the volume of the road, how many cars could be loaded onto a roadway. And it does seem to suggest that no roads will likely go over capacity because of this kind of event. But there's also, there's always issues with how accurate are their capacities. So it's upwards of 5,000 to 6,000 cars in places that did not have that many vehicles. That's kind of the gist of what will happen there. So I'll pass it to you for conclusions.
Great, thank you, Stephen. And so through our analysis, our literature review, and our public engagement events, we learned a number of key findings. Firstly, the causeway is currently at risk of flooding, even in minor coastal flooding scenarios, and that exposure to coastal flooding will worsen by 2050 as sea levels continue to rise. Secondly, the sizable amount of impervious surface will likely be subject to excess runoff during rainstorms and other storm events. Third, closures on the causeway will result in impactful diversions of traffic, specifically on Apple Street, which may have difficulty handling that amount of traffic, especially when larger vehicles are trying to use the road. And when both the causeway and Apple Street are closed, we predicted that traffic volumes on Route 22/Grapevine Road in Wenham and Route 1A in Hamilton would significantly increase. And lastly, impacts to both emergency services and local businesses must be considered when addressing this issue, considering the disproportionate impacts that they carry. And that concludes our presentation part of this event. Thank you all so much for listening and attending and taking the time to be here today. And you're welcome to reach out to us at publicinfo@ctps.org, and that's publicinfo@ctps.org. Thank you very much.
Lauren, could you go back to one of the beginning slides, the one that showed the first view of the causeway with the red dot?
This one.
No, it showed just, keep going, right there.
Yes.
Can you explain that again, what's going on there?
Sure. Yes. So this is the prediction for sea level rise and mean high or high water. And so mean high or high water is the average of the highest high tides that an area experiences. So it would be, so for Essex, this would be the average of the high tides that you guys experience here. And so this is adding 1.5 feet of sea level rise, which is what NOAA predicts for the Boston area.
And that's in what year, though?
2050.
But right there, it doesn't show that the roadway is impacted, right? Or am I missing something?
Yeah, so it's maybe a little bit drowned out on this.
Oh, okay.
But you can see the Essex River compared to where all of the marshland is flooded and areas next to Main Street are flooded, right next to the causeway.
Okay, because to me, it just looks like that's land, but what you're saying is there's another gradation in there somewhere?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
That's why I'm confused.
Sorry,
Okay.
yeah.
So in 2050, at the average high tide by then, is the causeway going to be underwater?
It may. That is
Okay,
what the projections.
Okay, thank
show.
you. That clarifies it.
Yes.
I think at this point, it would be good if you're willing to accept questions, technical questions about the work that was done and what to expect. I want to remind everyone that MPO, their charge was not to come up with solutions, and I'm going to explain a little later how we're going to approach that. But I believe we can take questions from people in the room, and then we'll take questions from people online. If you do have a question in the room, please go to the microphone over at the podium so everyone at home can hear you. Okay. Oh, we do have one. Okay.
Guy Bradford, Main Street. So I'm just curious, MPO, are you a private organization or are you a state organization? Who are you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we're somewhere in between those two, but we're not private, but we are required as a part of the metropolitan planning process. Someone described it recently as we do transportation studies, we fund transportation projects. What is the third one? Oh, and we and we do long-range planning. And so we assist different municipalities. We assist the MBTA. We assist the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and Studies. We do kind of a range.
So you're
things.
engaged by those organizations separately? I mean,
Or if you want to.
We are like a uniquely hard agency to explain what we do, but basically, if you know MEPC, we're their partner in transportation planning. So we exist and by mandate of the federal government to distribute federal funds to local transportation projects and studies. And then we also work with all of our partners, as Lauren mentioned, at the local, the state, the regional level.
is the primarily, are you an assessment group or a planning group? So,
We're a planning agency.
so you would, this is an assessment, what we've seen here. It's
Yeah.
not a plan.
Yeah, so we were just engaged by, well, the town of Essex approached us to identify this issue, and one of the things that we do as part of our work is technical assistance for municipalities. So that's like this very in-depth technical research that my colleagues shared. And so that's been the scope of our work.
And I can add in, we got involved with MPO primarily because they did a survey of all the communities that are in their region. How many communities roughly? 97 communities. And they were actively asking the communities about transportation problems in their area and how climate change, sea level rise seemed to be a concern. So we were one of the communities that responded to the survey. Not all 97 did. At that point in time, they looked at what people were turning in for problems and questions and concerns, and they selected a subset of those who replied to the survey to interview in more depth about the question. Essex was selected, and these folks interviewed me, and then I brought it to the Selectmen, and we felt as if it would be a great idea to see whether they could take it a step further. And to their credit, MPO decided to grant the town of Essex some technical assistance in the amount of $20,000 roughly, and that's what was able to bring about what you saw tonight. Now, I know that you're asking, okay, so how do we look at solution planning? This study is hopefully going to feed into a grant application that we're making right now with Mass DOT as our partner, and that is to a federal grant program known as PROTECT. And we're looking at applying for about $1.3 million. This data will feed into that to show what the problem is probably going to be and make the case for it, and also some of that transportation rerouting, all of that, in addition to what Mass DOT already has, that's all running into the grant application. If we get the money, Mass DOT, in concert with its engineering partner, will do an actual alternatives analysis. Anything from, and we're not advocating for this, but anything from all the businesses are going to need to be bought out and the roadway is going to have to be raised way up to, on the other end, we're going to raise up the roadway and the businesses all at the same time, but there could be many scenarios in between. And the whole point of the $1.3 million is to have public input, go through the alternatives, arrive at what seems to be the best alternative, and then from there pursue that. The study will actually come up with some base level engineering plans as well. So that's not now, it's in the next step, but we're very hopeful that we're going to get that grant. And it started with a survey, and now we're to a pre-study, and we hope to get to a formal study.
Great, thanks. So this is like step one.
Yeah, we're just so happy that it went beyond a survey and an interview. Now we're getting data that can be fed right into the application, and so now a regional planning organization is going to be helping us, helping people that are reviewing our application vet it and understand that there was some real pre-planning done as part of the application process.
So I'm just curious, one last question. As part of this analysis, did you speak with affected parties, like people whose businesses are on the causeway and so forth, and get any input from them, or was this more just a technical kind of?
Yeah, so our report does mainly focus on the technical analysis, but we did attended a listening forum with the Greater Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce, in which we talked with many of the folks that are here today, and we were able to get some really valuable insight that will ultimately go into, we'll take it into consideration for our report, and ultimately we'll go on to that grant application.
Yeah, because the report's going to be released relatively soon. The grant application is due no later than February 24th, so we tried to dovetail this so the timing one feeds the other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the room that wants to make a comment? Is there anyone at home that wants to make a comment? And I know that Stella is going to have to probably unmute you. Are they going to do raise hand, Stella, or?
Yeah, I see one raised hand.
Okay. Okay, and if you're not speaking, please mute.
Hi, this is Bob Myers from Washington Street in Gloucester.
Hi, thank you for coming on. What's your question?
My question is, does the tool, I think it's called Replica, what it's called, does it show topo lines where the water's crossing?
It does not directly have a topo map built into its platform.
I think we could probably, though.
Can you
get
hear
this-
me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear Stephen? No?
I can.
Okay. So Bob, can you hear us now? Can you hear us speaking?
My question was, I can hear you speaking.
Yeah, we got
can
your,
you hear
we
me?
did get your question. So if you could just mute, I will mute
thank
your
you.
speaker. Yep. All right. Very good. So Bob, I think we could probably get that downloaded and loaded into our GIS. So if we get the shapefile from MPO on the model, we do have very accurate topography in our GIS, and we could overlay that. So there will be a way to display that, although the tool does not automatically display it. Is there someone else who wants to speak now?
I see a hand up, Eric Hutchins.
Eric, you're on. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Eric Hutchins. A couple questions and a couple suggestions. You refer to mean, and this goes back actually to the town administrator's question about this map, which is perfect. The map would be, I think, a lot more valuable if it didn't just reference mean high water, especially in the town of Essex, where a lot of clammers know tide elevations. If you actually used real datum, meaning what is mean high water for the town of Essex that you're using, plus the 1.5. And the reason I'm raising that is the question that Mrs. Zubricki asked on this slide. I'm tempted to say that the street might not flood at mean high water plus 1.5. If you do the math, it floods now on king tides, but what I'm getting at is mean high water is what elevation currently, plus 1.5 is equal to what? That actually might be lower than a king tide today. Mean high water and king tides are significantly different, well over a foot. So it would be valuable to actually show mean high water current, and then actually show the number. What is Essex? Maybe, I'm just going to guess, 9.5 feet mean high water?
I
but
don't
it'd
know
be
for
valuable.
sure. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, it'd just be valuable for data-wise. You have the data. present the data so that it has more meaning than just mean high water. That's an arbitrary term, but put the number in there. That way there can be compared to tide charts that people may be aware of and already have an understanding of. And then that's an easy conversion. And then my other question, since 2 of your slides focused on impervious surfaces, and don't get me wrong, I don't like impervious surfaces. They're not good for the environment. They're not good for flooding in general. But from a sensitivity analysis perspective, I'm tempted to say that all of the impervious surfaces in Essex, in a modeling perspective, might change water elevations here by 1/10 of a foot at most. This is tidal, I believe. This is not freshwater runoff issue, or do you have some data that says otherwise? But to someone that doesn't know that would maybe think that runoff is a big issue here. Runoff isn't good. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I don't think it's an issue when it comes to flooding at the downtown causeway, or am I wrong?
Thank you. I do really appreciate your input, and we'll definitely take that into consideration for the mean high water. And I do believe that takes into account the king tide, but it's just an average of all of those high tides. But that is something we would have to look more into.
Yeah, so maybe for the final report, you can do the elevation reference. Maybe you can bring in topo in this. I don't know.
Potentially.
It would be nice. And I think as far as the question about runoff, I don't think it is a major factor, but maybe check the model or check what you think it is proportionally, because it's usually the tide that's really forcing this. I agree with Eric.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that the coastal aspect of it is the bigger issue. I think the idea of including the impervious surface is just to show that it's a contributing factor, just because the causeway and the area around the causeway does have a significant amount of that impervious surface compared to maybe a rural area or something of that nature, because it is a downtown. And with that does come more impervious surfaces, and it's only to say that it contributes to it, not necessarily that it causes it.
Thank you. Is there, Eric, do you have another question, or is there someone else that has a
No,
question?
that was it. Just those two. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Any more hands up, Stella?
Not seeing any.
Okay, so this is your chance again to ask about the technical portion of the program at home. Is there anyone else? Please use the hand raise function. Is there anyone else in the room that has got any more to say? Okay, so I think Maureen, oh, there is one. Okay, go ahead.
From Alan?
Okay, Alan, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Brendan?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the map here that you requested with the red dot where the Essex River passes under Route 133, below that you see a thin white line. It's going across the marsh. That's the old railroad right-of-way.
Yep.
Has there been any consideration of using that as a raised road somehow? I don't see realistically, short of building a dam all the way across the entire Essex River, AKA Holland building the dikes, how you can stop anything here, but that old railroad right-of-way could be utilized as a bypass around that. Just a thought,
Right,
a suggestion.
yeah. So it has never been brought up. It's been brought up as a way to perhaps get people out into the marsh as a walking trail or a biking trail. But even that is complicated because the right-of-way is no longer owned by one entity. It's owned by several private parties. You know, it's interesting you raise that issue, and I'm sure that if we get to the more detailed study with Mass DOT and the Protect grant, everything's going to be on the table, and they're going to look at things like that. They're even going to look at, you know, can you put some kind of tide gate structure out in the marsh? I doubt it, but everything's on the table if we get to that stage. So thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you, Brendan.
Okay, so I think we're going to pass it to Maureen from Town Green now.
Great, thanks so much. It's nice to see all of you here. We're going to have a group activity, and also we're going to be having the activity online too, so there's a couple of questions. So the purpose of this activity and the goal is to get as much public input and your ideas, your thoughts, your comments in a very short amount of time. And on the tables behind you, I've got brown paper, Post-it notes, markers, and there are 2 questions that we're going to have you answer in small groups. In a moment, you'll get up and join one of the tables, pull up a chair or stand, and the goal is to have the question asked, have a discussion of about 10-15 minutes, and write down your comments or suggestions on the brown paper or on a Post-it so that you don't forget it. Someone might be talking during the discussion that, it might make you think of an idea, and so write it down and put it on the Post-it note. And so that we could gather a lot of your thoughts and ideas, and also in the chat. And yeah, the 2 questions are, what are your concerns and worries about the causeway? That's question number 1. You'll have a discussion about that. And question 2 is, what does a resilient Essex causeway look like? What's your vision? And have the discussion, but be creative. You can draw a map. I've had people draw all sorts of things on, paper, but mostly I think what is great is this, really quick kind of writing down ideas and putting right down on paper. So let's go. Come and join one of the tables, and I'll join you there. When it's time to switch, I'll ring a bell. Any questions? Okay, let's go.
So please, if you're at home, please, if you got those questions, please, in the chat, provide your input to us, because that's all going to be taken down and taken into account. If you need, I think everybody got the questions, right? Okay, so at home, if you do have any type of question about what you're trying to do, put that in the chat too, and Stella will get back to you about it.
Let's do 3 per table. So just join a table.
So this portion of the program, you're not going to be hearing anything, because I think, Joan, you're going to film it, right? But we won't be picking anyone up on the microphone. So if you're at home, that's okay. If you're at home, just keep the questions coming, the answers or the comments coming in on those questions. And I'm pretty sure after you're done with that, Maureen's going to come back and do just a little bit of a summary. So just bear with us if you want to hear what this exercise was able to bear out in the room. Thank you.
We're still being recorded.
So I'm here because I worked on previous plans, and it's like I've always been.
I'm going to call the Essex Board of Selectmen to order.
I've been here and looked at it, but only better weather, not during the flooding. I come up, even though I live in Brookline, I come up to the North Shore a lot. I go sailing a lot out of Salem and Boston, that sort of thing. So I kind of have adopted the North Shore as my home away from home, so I really love the area. And I have been up here many times. But I've seen a lot of the photos of the flood. I mean, I know what it looks like. It's not a pretty picture. Right. I think, Brendan, right, what are you gonna do? If you isolate everybody from the road, now, yeah, you can pass through, it still becomes a through road, but now how do you serve all of those? Well, think about that though, if you look at the map, that might provide an alternative passage. Business is still over there.
I'm thinking maybe at the end.
I took that tour of town years ago. Right from Pioneer Square. I would say if I lived in this town, one of my biggest concerns, besides not getting to my favorite restaurant, is when you cut across both sides of the town, and there's really no other, and Apple Street is barely an alternative, and then you have to go all the way across to 128, get around the bridge. How do we get emergency services? Right? And so whatever side, you're on the right side of the tracks as a and if you're on the other side of the river, right. I see from when I was doing the planning years that wasn't popular. It didn't go. It got credited. I did twice, right? At town meetings.
Brendan, this is Lisa O'Donnell, if you can hear me. I am just here to call the Essex Planning Board to order in case we have a quorum. I know there are 4 online, and I don't know who's in the town hall. So I'm just being on the record as declaring the Essex Planning Board in session.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. We heard you, Lisa.
Thanks, Brendan.
I mean, the first time there's a critical, during a flood, there's a critical need for somebody to get to an ambulance and they don't get it and they die. Suddenly, there's going to be a huge problem.
Oh, we're just seeing this screen?
Well, I think that some of the meetings I was at with Brendan,
I think since we're sharing it here.
they talked about the idea of pre-positioning some of the emergency management on the other side of the river, even though like the station is here, having, it almost like creates a need for a redundant system. It looks kind of like you can't afford like 2 fire departments or 2 ambulances, right? And plus, if you're on the other side, now how do you still get to the hospital? Maybe you have to go to Newbury. I don't know where you go.
On the other side, you go to Groton, or you go to Bridges. And on the other side,
You get to 128.
yeah.
Okay.
switcher is pinned on here.
Is it pinned just for us?
Well, it's pinned for everyone in the Zoom. We could.
Is this the host?
Yeah.
Question 2. Did you start talking about question 2 yet? Oh, yeah. Great. I mean, it's sort of close together.
In,
Well, it's kind of like, what are your concerns?
if we wanted to, we could change. We can also.
Can we just try multi-speaker really quick to see something different?
We can also do spot.
Wait. She said she could take that. Undo that. I think we just did something. I think we did that. Remove pen. Wait, are they town switcher?
Yeah. Their town switcher. This is Lauren.
Lauren.
But we're both co-hosts, so.
Okay, so that was them.
Yeah. They're doing this.
Okay, so that is so town switchers.
Yeah.
We're better a second.
Them to go back. I mean, she went off of video. I think. Oh, now it's back.
Most of it is very
But upgrading,
We're town switcher, and this is what.
but using that as a transition, at the same time, trying to use it as street development.
Yeah, people were answering. Great. So we for 5 minutes, and then. As they're coming out, to just.
they don't have the last word in it necessarily, but it's a way to bring the local. So here we have this MPO organization that has something like 14 voting members, the majority of which are different cities and towns in the region. You know, and they represent like Boston's automatically members. The different sub-regions, North Shore, South Shore, Metro West, et cetera, all have voting members. And then the key agencies, NASDOT, MBTA, and my agency, MAOP, also have a vote on that. So it's like a board or a panel. But overall, we use all of these programs as it goes to the state. Yeah, I'm in. No, but I did that. We weren't involved with it. Actually, that had happened already before we didn't start the land. But we described, in the plan, we described what we proposed with that.
I know, I wasn't sure which parts. I came along after the fact. Yeah. It was pretty spirited. And there was actually there was an echo of that even later. More clear. We published the hazard mitigation, and that had to get reference to another thing. And there was a public comment period, and the town was avalanche by negative.
These are notes.
Which in a way,
I was starting to take notes in
Someone
here and then
other than me should be responsible
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
note.
I have.
We took a lot of notes. I took screenshots.
We can consolidate.
So it depends on what you're proposing first, you get
well, it was a very polarizing issue.
Yeah?
This thing will be, it's being recorded anyway,
We're
but,
recording on Zoom, yeah.
so are you gonna be putting it up soon, or do you want them to just put it up and we share the link? 1622 Studios, you put it up on YouTube.
Yeah, I think whatever you want to do, we probably won't publicize it on our channel right away.
We'll
so
do it from
whatever
there,
you want to
yeah.
do with it. And I can send the recordings to you afterwards if you want
All
just
right.
the Zoom interview.
And when Maureen's ready, you're just gonna read, what, a few comments off the
I'm
chat?
thinking, yeah.
Great.
And there were some questions to you in the chat as well. So I can maybe
Are they
just...
G-rated?
Yes, they are. But I can just say, the link to the questions.
And so you have a way to like download that, or you do?
I'm taking
Okay,
pictures.
that's great, that's great.
Yeah, because when we had a problem,
The north-south rail connector has been an idea on the
Yes.
table
I was gonna do that, and read through it.
I'll give you, in my opinion, the main reason why it didn't happen.
All right, so pretty soon she'll come back and then we'll wrap
They
it.
did. That absorbed $15 billion. And there was no appetite to come up. This is going to be a multi-billion dollar.
I think what Maureen's plan was
And there was
is
just
she'll
no.
bring us
equivalent to North and South Station. You have these two stations, separate sets of rail lines coming in from Philly from different parts of the region, with two separate railroads, from Reading Railroad to Pennsylvania Railroad. At least we have here one unified system, the MPO. It's just physically these stations historically got built in separate places and they weren't connected. It makes on paper all the sense in the world. I think it's just money. It's a hugely expensive project. We already kind of like exhausted everybody. Oh, you want another big day in Boston? I mean, just picture, this is not going to play with it. Well, don't, yeah, that's it. And there's another huge, very expensive project. It's much further along. It is advancing, and that's the intersection of the Mass Pike and along Starrow Drive and Silversfield Road. In Alston, like that's a major reconfiguration. You know that intersection is kind of like spaghetti right now. It's been very hard to navigate from whatever side. So there's all kinds of ideas on the plans that have been put together, and they've started to move forward in those plans in the earlier stages. They went through the environmental review process, et cetera. That's much more likely to happen, although it's still challenging because that's a multi-billion dollar project too. So how many multi-billion-dollar projects is we going to get? They finally got that. It only took 15 years. Yes, they do. Yes, they extended what used to be a line that only went as far as Framingham. They went out to Worcester a long time ago. A long time ago. That was extended. The extension south to both Fall River and New Bedford is just coming online now after many, many years of work. I mean, you kind of understand why it takes so long.
Let's come back.
There's local issues.
And the three folks who are going to say something, if you would just be here for a moment. And just stand here while I call you in.
So we're going to kind of come back in session here. Maureen's going to tell us about a few things, and then we'll probably also read some of the things that came in from people online.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Well, we had a really good interactive activity at the tables. And again, the group and online answered two questions. What are your concerns and worries about the Essex Causeway? And what does a resilient Essex Causeway look like? We've got some folks who are going to stand and from being here at Essex Town Hall and just give a quick summary about what happened at the table. Just come right up to the microphone there and tell us about what you talked about.
Sure. So the concerns are, I mean, there are essentially two concerns. One is safety with, all of our police and fire equipment and being able to respond throughout the town. And the second concern is the concern for our retail, our downtown, that essentially any sort of significant reconstruction or raising of the road in order to respond to the rising water would have a very, very negative impact on what is our downtown on the causeway. In terms of trying to think about what a resilient or what a solution would look like, and this is my own personal opinion, I really don't see an alternative to some sort of relocation process in the downtown. The water's going to rise at a point in time where it's not going to be sustainable that the causeway continue to exist as it's currently configured. So it's going to have to, if we agree that we want to keep one town, not have an East Essex and a West Essex, then we're going to have to do something to make the causeway work, and that would involve changes to the to the landscape that would essentially, given the nature of the buildings and structures that are there, it's going to involve some sort of relocation. I mean, alternatives would be, well, we looked at an alternative historically or in the recent past for Apple Street, and that didn't seem to have much traction. You know, you can think about Tobacco Road, which is another little bit further out alternative, which would require sort of buy-in from a number of people. But at the end of the day, you know, where the causeway is the heart of the town. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to, I think we talked about needing to maintain that.
Thank you so much. So Colleen, are you next?
Hi, good evening. So our small group consisted primarily of businesses that are located on the causeway. So a lot of our discussions focused around how it impacts, how the causeway impacts them and the changes would impact them directly. So in terms of question number one, what are your concerns, worries about the Essex Causeway? And the first primary concern was businesses closing. So this would lead to loss of a downtown hub for Essex, and the issue was that there would be limited to no place for some of these businesses to relocate. The marinas would not be able to relocate any place in inland because obviously they need that access to water, and there's limited areas inland for other types of businesses to relocate to. And additionally, the other concern is the cost to the businesses, the cost that they will incur due to insurance, as well as cost for repairs for the water and the flooding, and cost for updates that they would have to make to deal with future flooding. In terms of what a resilient Essex Causeway would look like, one thought that came to mind was a bridge that would go over that area to alleviate the issues with the roadway. Additionally, the potential of elevating the roadway 12 to 18 inches. If it was elevated sufficiently enough, then that would help alleviate the concerns for some time. And that would obviously entail the businesses to then raise their structures to match the roadway and to allow for that access. So there was discussions on the funding that would be needed to be able to successfully raise the roadway sufficiently to help that situation.
Thanks, Colleen. Ruth?
Thank you, Maureen. So we echo all the same concerns you've already heard. They're going to sound like we're copying them. Our concerns are businesses closing, the cost to the businesses, looking for alternative routes, cost for mitigating, as well as will raising the abutting properties cause flooding somewhere else. The possible solutions were redirecting traffic before people even get to our area, so a potential would be to redirect them in Ipswich before they even come down 133 so that they're not landing on Western Ave or Martin Street, Western Ave or Route 22. The next one was the possibility of utilizing Apple Street. In doing so, you would certainly need to widen the street to be able to get enough traffic to be able to use that as an access road. Consider using Tobacco Road as an alternative, reclaiming the old railroad bed for 133, and the final suggestion was to take Andrews to Rocky Hill to Pond Street, which would be another very expensive alternative. And then we feel that a resilient causeway includes having the businesses stay as they are, no matter what the road solution is. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And Stella, can you read out some of the things that we heard online?
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of what we heard online was quite similar as well to what we just heard read off. I'm just going to read a few comments. Apologies if I didn't get to yours. We had a very active Zoom chat. But on question 1, what are your concerns or worries about the causeway? My concerns or worries losing the Essex vibe with businesses and social fabric. My concern about the causeway is potentially losing a 100+ year family business. My major concern for the Essex Causeway is that due to current and projected sea level rise, something needs to be done for the long-term mitigation and planning in order for the road and businesses to remain viable. In addition, increased flooding will result in increased debris and contamination being discharged into the adjacent salt marsh, mudflats, and Essex River. My concern, the causeway businesses getting some kind of support or assistance to raise themselves up rather than having to leave the causeway. Access to and through businesses on the causeway. I want to make sure that emergency services remain available to those of us on the other side. And maintaining access for public safety needs to be a primary consideration for the half of residents living on the other side of the causeway. And a few comments on what does a resilient causeway look like. Slowing down the water coming into the Essex River, giving it time for the tide to change. Has there been any thought of moving the businesses away from the causeway and more towards Ipswich on 133? Raise the level of the causeway by 2 feet along with raising the buildings. It is hard to reimagine a new layout raised high enough for the current and future flooding. I would envision a bridge system that wouldn't impede the marsh, maybe like the bridge to Plum Island. Essex businesses and social gathering places would move to higher ground with a new center of activity. Bridged connectivity would allow for emergency response and vehicular transportation. A resilient causeway is one that will keep the town from being split in half and will accommodate businesses and residences in a sustainable way, and a space designed for and around flooding. I also just want to acknowledge we received several questions in the chat as well, some of these directed to Brendan, so we'll be passing those along to him, and you can follow up with him as well offline. And again, thank you all for participating on the Zoom. Apologies for not having a breakout room where we could facilitate more discussion there as well. But I think this is certainly just the beginning of these conversations. And all of this will be really helpful as we put together our report and as the town prepares for next steps. So thank you all for sharing tonight.
Thanks, Stella. I want to thank the team from MPO. I want to thank MPO again for being willing to pick up our situation, going from a survey to an interview to an actual tangible technical assistance project. We're very appreciative, and that's definitely going to help us as we lead into the Protect Grant application. I also want to thank Maureen from Town Green for helping to facilitate tonight's program, and everyone in the audience and at home for participating. Have a good night. I bid you peace.